We had one of those Yankee swap white elephant things at the house, and this was left behind by a musician friend of ours, and I got an idea. Let's see how this works. Oh yeah, I can rock out to the freezer. That could work. Anyway. Welcome back, everyone. So if you're still following my video series, you have seen videos of the following vehicles. My first car, my 87 VW GTI, my 97 Mazda 66, my 1970 Pontiac Tempest, my 1987 Nissan D21 pickup, followed by a 1987 Nissan Pathfinder, a 1999 Nissan Sentra, a 1989 Nissan Maxima SE, and lastly, did we say 2004 Nissan Frontier? I don't remember. And 2007 Nissan Versa is actually being uploaded as I speak. So, you would think that I learned my lesson from the 1987 GTI, the 87 Pathfinder, the 89 Maxima. You would think that I would have learned my lesson on what not to buy and dump money into. No. No. Not me. No. I did not learn a damn thing. And as I mentioned in the 89 Maxima video, that I'm always looking for something to fix. I'm looking for something to dump time, energy, and money into, and hone my skills as I do it. And what I really needed to do was focus my money on things that would appreciate in value rather than go the exact opposite. Things like houses. But I was too young and too stupid to do something like that. Or just save my money and not spend it. Stop buying new cars every couple months or every couple of years. Stop putting money into vehicles and just put it in the bank. And there are so many young adults that do the same damn thing, and they end up wasting their young adult years throwing their money in search of fruitless ventures. I was no exception. Interestingly enough, I started my YouTube channel shortly after I bought the Nissan Versa. That was 2007. You think by that point, I would have been done dumping money into junk vehicles for my own pleasure, guilty pleasure. No, I wasn't. Because almost, I think it was actually, no, it was before, I got this this one's out of order, but that's okay. It doesn't really matter. This vehicle is a little bit out of order on my list. This vehicle I bought while I still had the truck, but it was shortly before I got rid of the truck. Like, probably a couple weeks prior to me selling the truck and getting the Versa. This vehicle I bought strictly for work. So, as I mentioned earlier, at this job, I did a lot of just traveling around. Just running around, putting out fires, essentially, in the technology department. And that was my job. And I had to physically be at the locations to do it. So I was starting to rack up the miles on my truck. And I decided, why don't I preserve the truck, just keep the miles off of it, and I buy a little four-door sedan junker and just get it running, and use it for work. So my dad was... Oh, yeah. Oh, I almost forgot about this. This is good. My cousin said, hey, you're looking for a little runabout for work. I've got just the car for you. I've got a 1997 Geo Metro. This was the 3-cylinder model. It runs and it drives, but it needs a few things. It needs a radiator, it needs this, it needs that. I'm like, oh, great. You know, see, the thing is, the reason for all this was gas was getting expensive. And my pickup truck was not the most fuel efficient. Like, we're talking $4 a gallon gas, which we didn't know there was going to be a reprieve at any point in the future. So, what I did is I started looking for something that was fuel efficient. And when my cousin offered up his Geo Metro for like $50, I'm like, yeah, $50 for a Geo Metro. Now, for those of you who were alive and aware of the surrounding atmosphere, the economy, and the way things are going, Geo Metros started to print money. I mean, if you had a Geo Metro, you were golden. People were buying them up for stupid money. If you had a running and driving Metro that would pass inspection, it was worth thousands of dollars more than it normally would have been worth. We're talking a car that wouldn't be worth, on a good day, more than a couple $100. People were selling them for $4,000 to $5,000 because there was nothing on the market on 4 wheels that could get anywhere near the mileage a Metro could get under normal circumstances. We're talking a car that is safety is in the eye of the beholder, but beauty is clearly in the eye of the beholder. They were ugly, they were unsafe, but they were fuel efficient and relatively reliable. They were a Suzuki Swift, rebadged as a Chevrolet or Geo product. They had 3-cylinder engines. I think there were 1-liter engines in them. Generally equipped with 5-speed manuals or 4-speed manuals. I think they were 4-speed. And they were just a bare bones runabout car. You know, just barely big enough for 2.5 adults. Now, my cousin, it was actually his girlfriend's car, and she was done with it because it needed work. Now, I gotta stop for a second and say this video was not supposed to be about a Geo Metro. There was no Geo Metro in the equation. There's no Geo Metro on this list. I never drove a Geo Metro, but it leads me into the car that ended up replacing the Metro as I was... Let me finish. So, I took this car. So here's the deal. So, I hadn't seen the car in a while, and he calls me up and says, "You want it? Come get it. $50, it's yours." So my dad at the time, he had a friend who owned a towing company, and my dad would drive on the weekends and on the off hours for his friend, and he made a few bucks on the side. But he also had full use of the truck if he needed it. So I'm like, "Hey, Dad, let's go get this Metro. We'll bring it home, and I'll sort it out when I get it home." "Sure, no problem." So we drove the truck out to pick up this Metro. And it was every bit as hideous as I remembered it. It was the second version of the Metro, like the facelifted model, if you could call it that. It just looked more warmed over. The original Metro from like 1989 was actually a pretty cool looking car, but this one, no bueno. But, so, we're looking at the car, and I knew right off the bat the radiator was bone dry. It started right up. Just boom, bumped the key, fired right up, and it actually did move under its own power. So I'm getting ready to drive it on the tow truck, the ramp truck, and I heard this god-awful noise from the rear end, and I'm like, oh, that's not good. The rear drums had seized, and upon further investigation, I went and looked under the car in the rear, and the rear, I believe that one had a torsion beam rear end. Whatever the case may be, the rear suspension was so far gone, and the mounting points to the unibody were so far rotted out that the whole rear end just was coming out of the vehicle. There was like nothing supporting the back end of the car. The body actually wasn't bad. There was not a lot of rust. The engine ran as smooth as a 3-cylinder Suzuki can run, but it had rust in critical spots. It could have been fixed, but I was like, I'm not doing this. But I'm like, hey, we got the tow truck. Ask the guy who owns the towing company if he wants it. Because at this point, if I could get my $50 back, I was fine. And he was regularly paying scrap value or below scrap value for cars like this. So my dad said, yeah, he called him up and he said, yeah, he'll take it. Just we'll bring it to the tow yard and we'll be rid of it. And in that same conversation, my dad, because the tow company owner, he had vehicles all over his yard that were basically abandoned vehicles that he would pick up off the street or in parking lots. And he said, hey, if your son's looking for a little 4-cylinder runabout, little sedan or whatever, I've actually got one that I just pulled in. So we'll work out a deal. I'll give him a pretty good price on it. Give me the Metro, and we'll make it work. So that's exactly what we did. We went to the tow yard, and he had on his lot a white 1992 Nissan Stanza. The Stanza was the predecessor to the Altima. And fun fact, when the Altima was released, the car was called the Stanza Altima, or the Altima Stanza, one of the two, to help acclimate the public to the name change. That's how Nissan used to do it. They did it when they went from Datsun to Nissan, and they did that to the Stanza. So the car actually looked pretty decent. It was solid. It had a little bit of rust in the rear quarters, pretty typical. But it was white with blue interior, blue cloth interior. It had custom alloy rims on it, which I didn't really care for, but I didn't give it crap. He wanted like $400 for the car, and he took care of the paperwork. Because New Hampshire was a no-title state for anything over 15 years old at the time, or was it 10 years, 10 or 15 years. Because of that, I didn't need a title. So there was no dealing with salvage or scrap titles or anything like that. It was never branded or anything. We didn't brand titles on cars that old, if I recall. So the car, it ran. It had an exhaust leak at the manifold. And I drove it around the yard a little bit, and I took a hard turn, and I found that it had a clicking axle, clicking front drive shaft, meaning the CV boot had been torn, and the grease was washed out, and boom. I mean, I didn't really drive it too hard. I just kind of rolled it around the yard, and it was a 5-speed manual, so it shifted fine. I didn't notice any issues with the clutch. I mean, it was a pretty decent little car. I mean, the engine sounded great. The tires were in pretty good shape, except for the two rears. I think they were bad. But I said, yeah, you know what? Let's do it. $400. I'll buy the car. I'll bring it home. I'll get it registered, get it plated, inspected, and I'll have a nice little car to beat up for work. You know. And in the meantime, I'd have a little project to put money into, and time and effort, and maybe hone my mechanic skills a little bit. And there we go. So, fast forward about a week or two, I got the car, he delivered it to the house on the same truck that we had the Metro on, and I owned it. It was mine. So I started, the first thing I did was I popped the hood, I took the exhaust manifold off, and I ordered a gasket set for it. So probably a good half of the exhaust studs broke off. I knew they would. They always do. So I got some exhaust manifold studs, I used an easy out, which is a special reverse drill bit, to drill the studs out of the head, and I put new studs in. All was well. I popped the manifold on, new gasket, fixed that leak. Now the downpipe had a pretty bad leak on it in it as well, and I found that it was actually quite rusty. So I could not find a new downpipe for it. The pipe that goes from the catalytic converter, no, from the flex pipe flange. It connects the flex pipe to the exhaust manifold in the front of the motor. Intermediate pipe, I forget the name of that part exactly, but it had the oxygen sensor bung on it. So it was, yeah, one of those things. For the life of me, I quickly realized that I may have made a mistake with this car because parts were getting really scarce. The Stanzas, there weren't that many Stanzas on the road in New Hampshire, or in New England period, at that time. There were very few left, and this was just one of them. So I started calling Nissan dealers, and I came up empty-handed almost every time. Until I found one dealer in New Hampshire that had one of these parts on hand. Remember, junkyards didn't have them, dealers didn't have them, eBay didn't have them, but this one dealer in Salem, New Hampshire, Salem Nissan, I think it was called, or Rockingham Nissan, they had one on the shelf. Come and get it. $130. Yikes! That was 1/4 of what I paid for the car. More than 1/4 of what I paid for the car. So I was none too happy about that, but I said, okay. I went and I got the part, brought it home, installed it. I ended up having to install a, I had to weld a bung to the side of the, to the side of the pipe for the O2 sensor, because it didn't come with one. So I had to do that, and so I learned some welding skills. I had never welded before. My dad let me use his wire feed MIG welder, or just a wire feed arc welder, whatever the hell you want to call it. There was no gas involved. It was I think they call that a wire feed arc welder. Anyway, so I crudely welded the pipe, the flange onto the pipe. Put a brand new O2 sensor in it. That was like $30. I used a universal one. Got it all hooked up, started the motor, sounded great. No leaks, no more exhaust leaks. Then I started buying the rest of the parts I needed to get the car roadworthy. I picked up not one, but two. I picked up two half axles, or front CV drive axles units, just the whole shoot and match. And they were cheap. They were pretty cheap. I got them online. They weren't that expensive. And I popped those in. First time I'd ever done drive shafts on any car was that car. And they weren't that hard. Luckily, the ball joints were still good, so I didn't have to tear any suspension apart or anything like that. But I put those in. Then I think I did the front brakes while I was there, because they were kind of bad. So I put front brakes on it. Drove the car around the block a little bit. I had already had a plate on it. I just went and registered the thing. I knew I was going to get it on the road. So I drove it around. Things were pretty good. But, and then I started tackling the little things. I put new light bulbs in the dash cluster because they burned out. I picked up a stereo from the junkyard, and I put that in, so I had tunes. My neighbor actually still had some R12 refrigerant in his garage, so I charged the AC and got it working again on R12. I mean, it leaked out, but it worked for a moment, right? So I think it took me about a month and a half, and I had the car pretty well sorted out. Not even a month. It was a couple weeks. It wasn't even that long. I was making pretty good money at the time, and I was living with my parents, so I had a lot of disposable income to make this car right. And then I ended up buying the Nissan Versa in a weird, bizarre, moment of stupidness. I bought a 2007 brand new Nissan Versa, and I had this car just sitting in my parents' driveway. And that gets me to you're going to love this. When I registered the car, I had a bit of a sense of humor. And New Hampshire is known for one thing, well, a couple of things. We're known for liquor stores on the highways. We're known for no income tax and no sales tax. We're known for uninsured motorists. We have the highest number of uninsured motorists in the nation because it's legal here. But we're also known for vanity plates. And I'm like, I want to be one of those people. And I've got the perfect car and the perfect plate in mind. So this was the plate. This is the actual plate. I had two of these, but my dad got one of them. This is the plate that I put on the Nissan Stanza. Money Pit. So that turned out to be the funniest and the dumbest thing I did, all in the same stroke. So I got a laugh out of it. My neighbors and my friends got a laugh out of it. Now, one of the things that New Hampshire does is they, before they manufacture the plate, you get a paper plate with a handwritten. In this case, if you get a vanity plate, it's a paper plate. It says Motor Vehicle Department, and it has what you have for a vanity plate. And then in about a week or two, they send you the actual plate. And they are made in prisons. They really are. Our plates are made in the prison system. So this car didn't look too bad. It was very presentable. I actually went and touched it up with a can of white paint. It didn't really match, but it was close enough for me. So all the little nicks and dings, I just touched them up. The car wasn't supposed to look beautiful. I painted the front grille white to match the rest of the car. It was actually not too bad looking. I have pictures, and you'll get to see them if I haven't already put them in. But it was, amongst other things, it was just an old car that you just don't really see in nice neighborhoods very often. At least not at that point. Especially not now. So I was visiting a friend in the next town over. A very uppity town, upscale, wealthy, old money town. And we were up, I was playing poker with him, his parents, and his sister, I think, and because he was home from college for the week. And I got in my car and I drove back home. By this time, it was about probably 12 to 1 o'clock in the morning, and I got pulled over. I'm like, I didn't do anything wrong. I knew the car was right as rain. I mean, it had passed inspection. All the lights were good. There was nothing wrong with the car. I wasn't swerving. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I wasn't even speeding. I mean, I was doing nothing wrong. And I got pulled over in that car. And the cop came to my window, and he's like, "What are you doing tonight?" The typical town cop thing, I'm like, "Well, I'm just driving home, sir. What seems to be the problem?" And he just didn't know what to say because he didn't know what to say. He said, "Well, let me see your license and registration." There you go, because I had it. Remember that trick I told you guys earlier? When I get pulled over, now I've been pulled over for speeding a couple of times, and I've only gotten one ticket in my life. Knock on, well, whatever the hell this is. So I handed him I had my hands on the wheel. I had the license registration in my hand. I had the key on the dashboard. Ignition off, lights on for visibility, and glove compartment open. That's what I do. It makes the cop, it relaxes him. Have the window down. Now, if you're a free stater, do what you want. You're going to do it anyway. But look it up. Seriously, look it up. Free stater, police stop. Just do it. Close my video right now. Go on YouTube and type in the little search box, free stater pulled over. Just do it. Do it now. I'll wait. Okay, so, am I right? Window down, keys on the dash, papers in hand. Has nothing to do with Nothing to do with the Gestapo or "Where's your papers?" Nothing like that. Just being respectful to the law enforcement officers who put their lives on the line. I respect them. I work with some. They're good people, usually. But there's bad ones. There's bad ones in any profession. But definitely, there's some rogue ones. So anyway, I gave him my stuff. He sat in his car for what seemed like 20 minutes. He comes back out. "You're good to go, son." Okay. What was the why'd you pull me over? I didn't ask. Here's the thing. I was profiled. Yeah, I was being profiled. I knew it. I knew it right off the bat. I was being profiled for driving a not so great older vehicle in a great, nice, expensive neighborhood. That's what happened. And I just know it. It was an odd hour. He thought, and I know he thought he had himself either a drug dealer, somebody with DWIs, somebody without a license. He thought he had something there. He was going to make his nightly catch with this young adult male driving a shitbox. Let's just call it what it is. That's what he was thinking. I know it. There was no reason for him to pull me over. There was nothing wrong with the car. There was nothing wrong with me. I had a clean record. I did nothing wrong. Anyway. So things got a little interesting with this car. It started developing a nasty clutch slip. And I didn't notice it at first. It wasn't until I took it out on the highway. And I'm really starting to push it. Now this car, I didn't really talk about the drivetrain too much. But this particular vehicle, it had Nissan's, the engine that superseded the Z24 or NAPS Z dual plug ignition fiasco. This was the KA24DE, the very same KA24DE that went into the Nissan Access minivan, which you'll never find one. But the Access minivan was a very short-lived product in the early 90s, but it shared a drivetrain with the Stanza. The Nissan D21 pickup, the facelifted model for 1990, 89, 90. It was used in the 240Z, the 240ZX, sorry. It was used in the couple of other oddball products, but it was like this was the engine they put in damn near everything, and I'm sure it would have been. In fact, the Z20 or the KA24DE was made like well into the early 2000s. Might even still be produced in India somewhere. It was a good motor. I mean, it was heavy, it was slow, but it was a good motor. It was reliable. Except for the odd timing chain failure that they were known for, but we won't talk about that. So anyway, I was starting. So I took the car out on the highway. I drove another friend out to we were driving to Salem, New Hampshire for some reason. And on Interstate 93, I'm like, this thing is slipping like a bastard. I'm in fifth gear, and the more I pressed the pedal down, the engine speed would race, and not in harmony with the vehicle speed. It was something. I'm like, there's something very wrong here. And anyway, so I really started thinking about what I was going to do with this car. I had just bought a Nissan Versa, and I was already looking at buying a home. I had some money saved up, and I was looking at, possibly getting a house or a condo or something. And I'm like, I don't need this car anymore. So I popped it on Craigslist. I got no bites. And then a family friend, my parents' neighbor, he mentioned that there was a place where he parks cars on a regular basis. It was in the very center. It was in Milford Oval. If you guys are familiar with New Hampshire, Milford anyway, there used to be a gas station that would let people park cars for sale in one of the highest trafficked spots in town. In fact, it was like, it's to this day, it's like the highest trafficked area. If you want to sell a car and you want to sell it to someone in person, cash money, that's where you put it. And it was only a nominal service charge of $100. I'm like, well, spending $100 to try to sell this car for like, I think I wanted $800 for it. I'll do it. It was you know, it was a no-brainer. If I put the car here, it's going to sell, hands down. I'm not going to be staring at it for too long. I didn't want to put a clutch in it. I just didn't. But I fixed all the other problems. I fixed the bodywork. My dad helped me with the bodywork. He's pretty good at that. And it looked great. It was a good-looking car from about 20 feet. And everything worked. AC worked. Stereo worked. Cruise control. Everything was good. This car was good brakes, new axles. It was good. I even put 2 new tires on it. I put 2 brand new tires on this car. And I'm like, I just want to break even. I just want my money out of it. And if I got $800, I would have broken even after paying the guy. So, anyway, I parked the car and I didn't get a single phone call. I'm like, what the hell is going on? Nobody wants this car. I can't even give it away. And I'm driving by it one day, and I'm thinking to myself, why isn't this car selling? And then it dawned on me. Emblazoned on the front of this car was this. Are you going to buy a car with a license plate that somebody spent actual money on this license plate? Would you buy this car? That depends. That depends on who you are and what kind of a sense of humor you have. But to most people looking for a daily driver to get around town in, this doesn't sell cars. No. That wasn't going to work. So I hopped out of my truck, or my car. I think I had the Nissan Versa back then. I hopped out of the Versa with a screwdriver in hand, and I pulled the plates off. The car sat there for 3 more days. I paid the guy his $100. I took my freaking car back. And then I put it back on Craigslist. Actually, I never took it off Craigslist. And, oh my God. That car was a curse. You know, it's funny. I liked the car. I really did. It was a fun-to-drive little car. I learned a few skills on it. I learned how to use an easy out to remove bolts that are stuck in a cylinder head. I learned how to do CV shafts. I learned how to do a lot of different things. I just wasn't going to put a clutch in it. I'm like, that's asinine. Because once I start pulling the engine apart, pulling the transmission out, I'm going to find more shit. I don't want to do it. The poor thing had 150,000 miles on it, ran like a top, drove really nicely down the highway. And I even lent it to a friend who wanted to drive it a couple hundred miles, as a matter of fact. And he was looking for a car. His parents didn't have one to lend him, and I'm like, here, just take my Stanza. It's insured. Just have a good time. And he did. He took the car out, took his girlfriend out on a nice date, returned it back to me with a full tank of gas. We shook hands, and that was it. And the car performed flawlessly. It was actually, to my surprise, he didn't have any problems. No flat tires, nothing. So the car had plenty of life left in it, but I just wasn't having it. I didn't need it, and I decided, I put it on Craigslist, and I was not successful in selling it. But I did trade it for something that you're going to see in my next video. The car that I traded it for wasn't something I was looking for at the time or ever, but I couldn't turn it down. I was intrigued. I'm like, I could do something with this car. If not, I could sell it quicker than I could sell a Stanza. It was another Nissan product, and I'm not going to tell you what it is until the next video. Do I miss that Stanza? No, I don't. I had a lot of fun with it, though. Just kind of honing my skills and getting dirty and getting in there. It was a waste of I think I wasted $1,000 in total. Just wasted it. But You know, for what I spent on that car, I couldn't get back. And you know, if I were to learn those skills elsewhere, I just wish I put the money into something better. And as a 35-year-old, I can say that and mean it. Would I do it again? Hell yeah. I bought this, didn't I? But this was a better purchase. This little Miata was a much better purchase than any of those other cars. And this one will actually go up in value, and has so far. But it's just, I was a sucker for late 80s, early 90s Nissan styling. If you look at the Nissan Stanza, look at the pictures I posted, look online, it just has a nice, honest look to it. It's just an honest looking car, and it's not fast, but you think, I mean, little four-door I'd say it was a compact, I believe. It wasn't quite mid-size. I think it was a compact. But with a 2.4 liter engine and a 5-speed on the floor. I mean, how cool is that? How could you say no to that? And Nissan engineering back then wasn't what it is today. It was far better. Those Nissans were fairly bulletproof. They did have their flaws. And like I said, the 2.4 liter engine back then was notorious for timing chain issues. It would start out, I believe, as a worn-out guide, and then it would quickly go to hell from there. But at the time, the car was about 14 years old, and it drove like a brand new car. It really did. It really did. It was just a good vehicle. If it wasn't for the clutch and, you know, the rust that it had, I probably would have kept it a lot longer. But it's in the past now. And yeah, I'd do it again. Just because it was fun. Some people, they blow their money on sports memorabilia. They blow their money playing golf. They waste their money buying video games. I mean, I know people that have spent many thousands of dollars in video games, and you know, that's what they do for fun. For me, I like blowing money on stuff with wheels, be it motor scooters, motorcycles, cars. I just can't get enough of it. And I'm actually itching for another project now. But I think I'm going to slow down. I've got this house to fix up, and that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm fixing the house up, putting my money into this. At least this house will go up in value. Whereas cars generally, unless they're rare classics, they don't really go up in value. But surprisingly, the NA and NB Miatas are really starting to go up. Will we see that plateau? Probably. But if history serves me, there will always be a market for collector cars, classics, stuff like that, especially low mile and good condition versions. Unfortunately, but ironically, we never saw back then, we're like, there's never going to be a market for old Japanese sedans. It just won't happen. And just recently, in the past couple of years, Radwood happened. It's the weirdest thing. And now, all of a sudden, early 90s Japanese sedans are going up in value. Who would have thought? If I still had that Stanza and I had fixed the bodywork properly and done a little bit more in detail, I probably would be able to sell that car for $2,000 to $3,000 today. Interestingly enough. And that's because it's so rare. They're so hard to find. Kind of funny, actually. Another car that, if you're watching this video and you know of or have ever seen a Nissan Tredia, a Mitsubishi Tredia, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. My parents owned a 1988 Mitsubishi Tredia in the early 90s. They had it for like 6 months before it got totaled. It was the most comfortable cruising car I think my parents ever had. It was underpowered as shit, but it was comfortable and it was really well equipped. I'd love to hear from you. The Mitsubishi Tredia in the United States. I don't care about Europe, Mexico, Canada. In the United States, I can't find any pictures of one in the U.S. I can't find any reference of one ever being in the U.S. The cars were so poorly built, they just didn't hold up, and they've been gone for decades. Let me hear what you have to say in the comments on that one. Mitsubishi Tredia. It was basically the sedan version of the Cordia, if I believe correctly. The Cordias weren't so hard to find, but the Tredias, they don't exist. I swear to God we had one, and it was totaled by a Honda Civic in a parking lot in 1993. I was in the car. I knew I was there. I didn't dream this. It happened. Anyway, have a great night, guys.